Yeah, I'd like to ask Bruce, that's kind of interesting to me that in our society we trust the voters to vote for, you know, president, senator, and all the great decisions in our life. But on the board of directors of Channel 11, we can't have a voice, we can't vote for the board of directors. To me, that gets down to the root of the problem. Because the board is usually the key component that makes all the key decisions in an organization. I've been on boards myself. And to not have a democratically elected board creates, to me, the root of the problem. You know, and if we don't get down to the root of the problem, this discussion, we're not going to go any further. So why isn't the board? Furthermore, why can't you say something at a board meeting? I've been to the board meetings. You can't. There's no real open forum at all. In fact, ultimately, why you're getting all the flack tonight, and I think it's great that you're here, is that it's like a squeezed snake or something, or like a hose that's about ready to burst. Well, we're bursting right now because we have nowhere else to go to vent all the different opinions we have. So why isn't the board democratically elected, or at least some of the board?
Well, I can address part of that. Part of it I can't because I'm not a board member and I can't speak for them, and that's, I think you'd understand that.
Right,
let me,
why can't they speak for us?
Well, the board is, as most, and in fact, you know, I would say probably every, and I can't say this with 100% certainty, but let's say that 95%, if not more, of all nonprofit boards of major and even probably minor nonprofit organizations in this city, as far as size, are not elected. They are either self-perpetuating or named by a greater authority if they're a part of a greater organization. In public television, the community licensees, of which WTTW is one, and there are many in the country, are self-perpetuating boards that started when these organizations began. I can't speak, you know, I'm not giving the excuse that's because it's been there, it will always be that way. I do know that the practicality, again, you may not agree with it, but the practicality of running any organization based on when it comes to running something that's going to stay viable. And again, we're going back to something I said earlier, you may disagree with it, but we're still sitting and looking at the vast majority of our viewers who think we're doing a very good job in the city. So it is, if you look around the country, I can tell you there are two public television stations. One has a fully elected board and is a total financial disaster, and that's KQED in San Francisco, and probably has one of the worst reputations of, if you just, it's not funny, but, and I feel bad about it because it's, there are a lot of good people that work at that station. They do a lot of good programming. I was out there recently.
Before they elected the board?
Oh, they've been elected, I believe, since their inception. I am all for democracy, and I'm all for input, but there just comes a very real fact in dealing with any organization that if it's opened, in many cases, if they're open to public vote, it will end up being driven into the ground. The other board, by the way, that has a third of its board members, hey, just look at the United States government to take a look at that. I mean, you know, I don't want to get into a debate about the electorate, but I'm just saying that in running a business, which this is, and you know, we can't deny that whether it's a nonprofit business, you know, look around this city at the Art Institute, look around, I mean, every one of these organizations has to pay some attention to making sure that they can balance their budget. And that's a reality. And it doesn't matter whether I'm there or not, and all of you belong to organizations, you're sitting in a place that has to balance its budget. And for all their ideals about how they want to operate, you know, they have to make decisions as well. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't have the answer as to why it was there. It's something that necessarily shouldn't be accepted, but the evidence to our, and I can say, and you know, and I've talked to most of our board members, they see little evidence that the system we have in place is not working. So that's all I can say. Well, you know, again, if you listen to what I've said tonight, I mean, there are many ways they get feedback. There's many ways that the station management get feedback. Do they know that there are people in the city, in their viewing area, that aren't satisfied with our program? Oh, yeah. They get copies of all, you know, they know that when they get copies of press clippings, they get copies of material that relate to groups. In fact, Scott Sanders spoke before the broadcasting committee of our board. They heard firsthand from Scott. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy, right.
Can I interject a little reality into this conversation for just a second? I mean, the board of nonprofit foundations are rich people. Period. I mean, look at any university board. Look at any. I've been on university boards. I was on a nominating committee for one, and when it came to the time to get new board members, what we did was examine their net worth. That is what. Look at the names on the board at WTTW, or look at the names on the board of Channel 13 in New York, or Yale University, or Harvard University. That is what the criterion is.
We look for people that have influence in the community, and for people that have deep roots into the community, because they in effect represent a lot of people. Do most of those people happen to be in the upper echelons of the business world, or other types of businesses where there's a lot of money and they've acquired? Absolutely. So I think I'm just twisting a little bit. We don't sit there and say, and the board, I know, does not say, well, we need to get some more people on the board who have a lot of money.
I want to talk a little bit about the difference between democracy and the appearance of democracy. Because it seems to me that what you're talking about is, to put it generously, TTW is a civil service bureaucracy, and perhaps less generously, it's a corporate hierarchy, right? And that, in a sense, is self-selecting. You know, that certain types of people enter those types of institutions and are given positions of authority to make decisions. That's very, very different from the public, right? The public, who in many cases are poor, for instance, are not represented, and their interests aren't represented within that structure. And it's also very, very different, I think, from democracy itself, which attempts to encompass all points of view, all positions, in a kind of radical equality. You know, I would also say that media is a very, very peculiar animal. Media institutions are peculiar animals, and yours is perhaps the most peculiar of all. It is not a private business. It inhabits a very peculiar sort of space within this culture, and that space is important precisely because it defines so powerfully our experience of ourselves and others within this culture. And so in that sense, there's a very particular kind of responsibility that these institutions have. And it's absolutely inadequate, I think, to say that this is a business at the end of the day we have to make money.
That's not what I said. I said we still have to balance a budget. Yeah, there's a difference there. I mean, I'm sorry, but there is a difference. And at the end of the day, to use my words before, we do have to balance a budget. Now, there are many ways to do that, and there may be disagreement on how to do that. But, you know, there are a lot of people working in the organization. You know, those of us, we come, we go, and there's a...
I mean, what the balancing of the budget is dictated by precisely the people who are included in the structure in the first place.
Right.
I mean, you know, other constituencies, poor people included, have the capacity to balance budgets.
Sure.
You know, it's just that they're rarely given the power or the authority to participate in the balancing of a budget of a public institution.
Let me just say one thing in this board electoral issue, because it sounds very, you know, oh, how could we elect the board, that kind of thing. You talked about KQED. And in fact, in Chicago here, we have a board that is partly elected at Chicago Cable Access. When Chicago Cable Access first came in, there was a 50-person appointment